Got okay. So the card that's come up for you today is the fears we don't face become our limits.
Interesting.
How does that card resonate with you today, or given the journey that you've had, the fears that we don't face become our limits?
Yeah. I think so my word of the year, I don't know if you do word of the year, but my word of the year this year is, or phrase I suppose, is choose vulnerability. So I, for a really long time, I guess, have kind of been fearful. Although when you meet me in person, or actually I find on podcasts, I'm very comfortable to, like, really be who I am and open and
Mm,
whatever else. I really struggle to do that online, because if I'm writing, like if I'm writing a Substack post, I feel like I'm constantly editing myself. And then similarly, when I put things out on social, I'm like a bit fearful to sometimes always say really what I want to say, because I'm, fearful of like backlash potentially. And it's fine. This last year, I've done a lot of like excavation of everything, if you
mm.
will. And I don't know if you know this about me, but I got diagnosed at the age of 37. So I'm nearly 40. I'm going to be 40 in March. At the age of 37, I got diagnosed with ADHD. And, for a lot of my life, I have masked to kind of fit in and not kind of stick my head above the parapet, if you will, because I feel that I guess it just didn't feel safe to be who I truly was. And I think it felt safer to kind of like not follow the crowd, because I have always kind of stood slightly to the right of that.
Mm.
But I probably, what's the word, like watered myself down a little bit, if you will, because, if I think back to like when I was at school, I didn't do that. And I, got quite badly bullied.
Mm.
And so that then kind of taught me from quite an early age, like it's not really okay to be who you are, because people don't like that. You've kind of got to be like fit in. And then, went into the world of work and also had an experience there where I was bullied by a colleague. So, that it just kind of all compounds, doesn't it? Those life experiences. But it
Yeah.
kind of took for me to get that diagnosis almost to give me, I guess, like permission, which is sad, isn't it? But gave me permission to be like, look, this is who you are. You can't be scared of it forever. You've actually just got to kind of get and accept that. But I'm trying to undo like 37 years of habit of masking, So I feel like I said, in the last year, I've really kind of excavated a lot of that stuff. I've really like, I think reconnected with who I am as well. Because, deep down, I'm still the same girl I was before I got made redundant twice, before I was bullied, before I had two kids, which, for me was a huge, like,
Hmm.
wah,
Yeah.
explosion in my world. It really kind of made me reassess my life, because before kids, my career was my life.
Yeah.
And I remember on the day that I left to have my eldest daughter, I cried, because I was like, I actually don't know who I am anymore. Like, my career was so tied to my sense of self.
Yeah.
And so then I very much took on the role of, right, I'm a mother now. And now I guess, I'm done having babies now. And I am approaching 40, and I'm like, right, who actually am I when I haven't adopted these roles? Who is Kendall? So yeah, I think that is a big one for me. And this year it's like, how can I bring, I guess, some of my warmth and truth of who I am to all of
Mm.
my interactions. Because like I said, I find it quite easy, like one-on-one or in person, to do that. But there's something about the internet, isn't there, that kind of
Yeah.
makes you fear, because I guess when you're having a conversation one on one, you've probably already identified actually you've got some things in common with that person. Like, you asked me to be on your
Yeah.
podcast. I had a little look at all of the episodes and your socials, and I thought, oh yeah, I think we've got similar values. We're aligned in certain
Exactly.
areas. And similarly, like in a one on one situation, like in person, you've either got kids that are at school together, or you live in a similar area, so you can kind of find those commonalities. But I guess the
Yeah.
scary thing about just putting stuff out onto the internet is like, what, you will come across people that don't resonate with what you're saying, and that actively, especially when you've got quite strong opinions on certain
Yeah.
things. I talk a lot about the role of women in society, and how that is, the systems that we're living in is really challenging for us, and a lot of people don't like that. So,
No.
we were talking a minute ago before we started recording about YouTube, and I have got a YouTube channel on there. And one of my most watched videos is talking about the patriarchy and how it holds women back and relating it to gardening. And there's comments on there from people being like, "Oh, sub story, blah, blah, blah," and it's hard when you are a sensitive soul like I am to put yourself out there knowing that you're going to get those
Yeah.
reactions. So I feel like, I've done, like I said, a lot of work over the last few years since I had that diagnosis of acceptance of who I am. And also
Yeah.
learning, what I need in my life to be able to support me to be able to live life to its fullest. And I
And
think
is this where Adventures with Flowers came from then originally?
so. So I started Adventures with Flowers when I was off on maternity leave with my eldest. So she was born in the June, and then I did my first load of workshops at the Christmas time because so I think I said, didn't I? I'd been made redundant a couple of times. That had really
Yeah.
kind of totaled my self-worth. And then when I announced to my bosses that I was pregnant, they were unimpressed, to say the least, and, started questioning whether I'd be able to do my job with a young family and all of these kind of like ridiculous things. And it got me, I was quite stressed. I also had this like bullying incident with this colleague that kind of hadn't really been
Mm.
resolved because my manager was pretty weak and just kind of wanted to brush it under the carpet rather than actually dealing with it, which made me feel very unsupported. So when I went off and I had my daughter, I basically decided to park everything because I was like, I just need to focus on, growing this baby and not being utterly stressed
Yeah.
like the entire time. So I effectively just had to park their behavior and finished work and then went off and had her. Those first few months were like utter chaos, kind of readjusting. And then because, like I said, got a very busy brain, didn't know about the ADHD at this time, I was like, oh my God, 9 months off of work. I just can't, it's boring, I think, being a new mum. Like literally, you're just like,
Thank you.
yeah,
It is so boring. For those of you who've got children, I'm sure that you will get this, and you feel guilty for saying so, but
yeah.
it can be so boring.
And, I don't think that applies to just people with ADHD. I think that applies to many women because we're told from the minute we're born that we're only worthy when we're producing and creating and working and doing. You don't get shown how to be as a woman. It's always like, clean the house, do that, not just like household stuff, like obviously working, but you know it's really confronting when all of a sudden all you have to do is, wipe bums and like breastfeed if you choose to do that, or feed in any way, or, facilitate nap times. For me, there was very little, mental stimulation. And that I
Yeah.
found really, really challenging because at the same time, I had to care for this tiny thing that needed to like be on my body or, so
Yeah.
I felt really trapped and I was like, right, well, I know that I don't want to stay in the forensics world forever because, well, I certainly don't want to stay at that company because they've treated me like complete shit. And actually, the world of forensics had changed quite a bit. It wasn't kind of the world that I'd got into. And actually, I was like, I don't really want to be in this anymore. But of course, it's that classic thing of like, but that's my safety net. That's how I earn my
Yeah.
money. Like, how can I, in 9 months, while I'm also trying to care for this tiny baby, how can you completely change my career direction? But I think I was like, I've got to give it a try. So when I was at university, I worked as a florist on a flower stall in Bath town centre because that's where I went to uni. And I used to spend a lot of time making Christmas wreaths when I was there and, as well as other things. And I got to kind of probably October time. So literally like 3 months after my daughter was born, I was like, oh, I need to think of something to get myself out of this forensic world. And I was like, what else do I know how to do? And I was like, well, I know how to create beautiful things. And I had already been using gardening and, creating and making lovely bunches of
Mm.
flowers like to help my own well-being. So I was like, how can I get this to more women? Like I talk about when my
Mm.
daughter was born, I had this like mad, like I call it like my lioness moment. Like literally the minute she was born, I just had this like almost like out of body experience where I was like, I've got to do something about the way that women, look after themselves in this world. Like, I don't want her working herself into the ground in the way that I did, trying to prove herself constantly, because actually that is just it's not working for anybody, it certainly wasn't working for me. And I could see like colleagues that were also heading in the same direction. And then, spoke to other other women who were like, I just feel like so wrung out all the time. And I was like, this isn't life. Like, goodness me. I really don't believe that, like, gone are the days where you had a job, you worked your butt off, you retired at 55, 60, and then had a lovely long retirement. A, you're lucky to get there, like health
Mm.
wise. B, there's no relying on a state pension, is there now? Like you can barely live on that which you get. So my whole mantra is like, how can you live your life and enjoy your life whilst you're earning money, whilst you're, it should be, we don't have to like work and then retire and enjoy. Because, I look at my dad and he retired at like mid 60s and he was dead by 70. So like, he didn't really get to enjoy that time. And he had an illness that meant he couldn't even really enjoy those years that he had when he was retired. So I just kind of think like that's just not how life is anymore. And luckily, I think the younger generations to us are,
I've picked up on it.
they have, yeah. And I think
Yeah.
that, they're far more aware of incorporating their well-being and looking after their bodies
Yeah.
and their minds. So, yeah, so I basically was just like, right, I need to get this out there to more women. How can I do that? And I didn't feel confident at that point because I'd had no formal training in gardening to do gardening workshops, and it was coming up to Christmas. I thought, well, actually this is a really lovely way. So I started with mindful Christmas wreath making, because for me it was all about not treating gardening or creating as a task to tick off. It was
Yes.
about how can we be as present in the moment as possible, because that, especially once I'd had my daughter, I'd noticed that because I had way less time to garden, I couldn't spend all weekend out there like I used to be able to before I had kids. It was like, how can I get the same impact just spending all day in the garden in 5 20-minute blocks? So it was all, for me, was about how can I ground myself into this quickly and stay as present in the moment to get those benefits. So yeah, so I'd already been doing it for myself. And then I was like, right, I just need to get this to more people. So started with those workshops. And then I did that for a couple of years, obviously went back to work in that time. So it was like utter chaos then. And then I think it was the pandemic year, I started a mindful gardening subscription box. So I
Okay.
used to send like the activities and the plants, like the seeds, the plants or the bulbs out to people, and then they would do them. Which I loved coming up with the activities and doing like the training side of it, but I didn't enjoy like being Amazon basically and like packing
Mm.
boxes. So I did that for about a year, and then I was like, I think I want to move this more into kind of like the training side. So I stopped doing the boxes, but continued with the training. So just started to add more workshops. Obviously, I did add some more workshops, and then pandemic hit, so that was
Mm.
less than ideal. So largely then at that point it went online. So I set up like an online membership, and that still exists to today. So it's just kind of grown from there. Then I added sort of one-to-one services in, and I still run lots of workshops because there's something really powerful about women coming together. I get told often when people come to my workshops, the women say, I don't know, I haven't, afterwards they're like, I didn't know anyone here, and I've come and I've spoken about things that were like on my heart, and I just needed to share and feel safe to share them. And so thank you for creating that safe space where we feel able to share these things. So I think people often come with the view of like, oh, that sounds like a nice activity. Actually, then when you're there and you've got somebody that's holding that space for you, sometimes things come up that you maybe didn't realize you needed to release. So yeah.
Because there's something about doing something with your hands.
Mm.
I've spoken to other guests about this as well, while talking and sharing stories or sharing space with somebody. So planting seeds, planning what you're going to do in your garden, talking about the flowers, it kind of, it lends itself to, as you say, that vulnerability.
Mm.
I just want to take a moment to applaud you, actually, because when you said at the start of the episode, my word or my phrase is to choose vulnerability. You have just been so vulnerable with me. We don't know each other. We've come together and we've connected online, but you have opened your heart to me and shared, gosh, so much about yourself and the challenges that you've faced, and opening up about being bullied and, childhood experiences, and you've spoken about loss and the importance of supporting other women by showing up yourself. I mean, wow. I mean, thank you so much. And I'm fascinated by the draw to the garden, because it sounds to me like you've always been in the garden, but now it's taken on a whole new life for you. And also with forensics, because I there's definitely links there. You
Mm,
know, with forensics, you have to be really focused in on the details, don't you?
mm,
And I can just imagine you sort of combing through lots and lots of different artifacts or different
mm.
things. And it's the same with gardening that you've talked about excavating.
Yeah.
There's definitely links there, isn't
Yeah,
there?
there definitely is. I think so. When I was working in forensics, I was a forensic biologist. So I used to examine sort of like clothing and weapons for like body fluids, so like blood, other body fluids. And
Lovely.
one of one of the things that I used to have to do quite a lot was to examine like a black jacket for blood. Now you can imagine, obviously, black and red. Red doesn't
Yeah.
show up very obviously on black, so you used to have to use like a microscope to do it. Hence the glasses. Now ruined my eyesight. But, I would sit for hours doing that. And when I got diagnosed with ADHD, my husband was like, I don't understand how you can have ADHD when you used to sit and do that. I was like, yes. But when you find a blood spot, can you imagine the dopamine hit you get when you find that tiny bit
Wow.
of
Yeah.
blood? So yeah, you're right. There is, it's funny actually. I don't really associate gardening with the detail because I very much, no, that's not right. I don't associate gardening with like the precision perhaps that I needed in the forensics,
Okay.
because for me, I think gardening comes with too many rules and regulations. Okay. So
Okay.
like, I feel like, especially on the internet, I've in the past posted videos and then people like decide, not invited to, but decide to jump on and tell me that I'm wrong for doing this time of year or whatever. And I'm like, first, like, it's usually, I hate to say it, a middle-aged white man that's trying to tell me that. I'm like, piss off, I didn't ask for your opinion. But also, I kind of think with our seasons the way they are now, there are no rules, like you can buy a book from the garden centre and it says, or,
Yeah.
from wherever, Amazon, and it says,
Mm.
do this at this time of year. And actually, a lot of the work I do with my clients is like, right, okay, generally in spring or generally in March, we would do these things. But actually, could you just take a second and look out the window? Can you actually just go and stand in your garden? What does it feel like to you? Does it feel cold? Do you think, your tiny little baby seedlings that you've been nurturing on the windowsill, do you think they're going to be happy to be out here? And for me, so much of my work is actually connecting people back with their gardens. When I started gardening because I had a garden and it needed doing. Like I moved into
Mm.
this house and I was like, oh, there's a garden. Better add that to do list, and it did. It literally went on my to-do list and then I'd slave out there all weekend. But very quickly, I realized that was the only time my brain was quiet ever in my life. And so for me, I was like, wow, like I'm doing this thing and it's actually meaning that I can not have this constant internal chatter. Much of it was negative, my internal talk, because of past experiences. And that's really exhausting to have somebody constantly twittering your head, telling
Yeah.
you your shit. So just to quiet that was amazing. And then over time, as I was, making an area go from looking absolutely dire because the garden was so overgrown and awful to looking really beautiful and having loads of colour and, beautiful flowers, it really helped to turn that negative voice to slightly more positive. Like, yes, you're
Yeah.
getting all this negativity from work and these people that you're around, but actually, God, look at what you're doing. You're like growing life here, you know?
Yeah.
So it kind of really was like, not only from like a turning down the noise point of view, but also from like a, growing my capacity, I guess, and helping me to be a
Yeah.
bit kinder to myself. And connecting me back with the seasons. We're cyclical
Yeah.
beings as women. We're meant to, live in alignment with the seasons. And therefore, if when we're so disconnected because we just spend all time in like a soulless office with like fake lighting on us at a
Yeah.
computer, is it any wonder that we feel all at sea? No.
Mm.
We have no joyful input into our life if that's all we're doing, especially if we're then coming
Yeah.
home and just scrolling on our phones or staring at the television, watching other people live their life in a dramatized fashion. Like, when do
Mm.
we get to choose ourselves and actually make us a priority? And that's like my whole work, basically. Like, on the face of it, it's gardening, but actually it's not. It's
Yeah.
about choosing yourself and putting yourself in a situation where you can experience joy every day if that's what you choose.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I've just got this image of you tending to the earth. That's really what you're talking about. It's making sure that the environment for you, the women that you're working with, can bloom. You know, it's not necessarily about the end product. Actually, it's the process of
Absolutely. Yeah.
creating
Yeah.
that soil, that richness.
Yeah. So one of my best performing videos online is a hilarious video. I've got no makeup on. Like I think I'm like exhausted from no sleep with a small baby. And I basically am saying like, I'm not here to teach. I'm not here for like the open up your gates to the show garden crowd.
Yeah,
I'm not here to teach you how to grow prize winning dahlias. I'm here to get you and mobilize more women into the one space that can actually heal them. And that is their garden. And, because actually it's on us, right? As annoying as it is, no one is coming to save us. Like,
no,
and if we can find like 5 minutes, some of my activities are 5 minutes long. You bloody deserve 5 minutes, and then over time, what I find often is people start with 5 minutes and then it grows to 20 minutes, because actually they're seeing the benefits spreading out to all areas of their life, not only in their own heads, but also they're then able to be calmer with their children, less snappy with them. They're able to be a bit
yeah,
more connected with their partner because they're more connected with themselves. If you're completely disconnected from yourself and everyone around you, is it any wonder that like your partner just pisses you off? No.
yeah, yeah,
Like, but
yeah,
until you truly connect with yourself, you can't really connect with another
with
person
others.
because you don't know you don't know who you are. So it's is much more than just gardening. It really is about, helping women to reconnect with themselves and the world around them. And I think, goodness me, when we look online and we see the things happening, like if some of those people making decisions out there were more connected with themselves and like the living world, perhaps we wouldn't be seeing so much violence and horrific things in the world, if they were better able to have a space to feel their feelings. I talk a lot about my garden. When I go out there, if I've had a tough day, I literally feel the feelings coming out of me. Many of my activities, my horticultural therapy activities, are encouraging you to feel your feelings because we've all become so disconnected. We just shove the feelings down. Oh, I'll deal with that later. I'm too busy. I haven't got time now. And it's like, no, because they don't go anywhere if you shove them down. They just stay inside you, like making you overwhelmed and stressed. So it's all about how can we get rid of those emotions that we don't want to carry anymore, you know?
And I think we, touching upon, what we see in the news, what we hear, I actively avoid the news only because I find it so affecting. But I think we generally have become desensitized to what we see and what we hear. So I absolutely believe that, what you're saying is so true, to be able to connect to your feelings. And it's something that we're trying to hold space for our little boy as well, because, we need to ensure that our children can feel those big feelings as well.
But it's really hard to do it's really hard to hold space if you are
Hmm.
really triggered and are holding a lot yourself, and
Yeah,
many people I speak to, not only do they have small children, they also have parents that are maybe starting to become ill and they're
sure.
having, so they're holding women are holding so much. And what I'm helping with, or what I help women to do, is to create a space that's literally outside their back door that holds them, because who's holding the
Yes.
women? We talked earlier, I can't remember if it was on the recording or if it was before, but about the village. And I've actually just read a really interesting article about it. Everyone says, oh, we don't have a village anymore because, we move away, we're
Mm,
living more independently, we're busy, we don't have time. And often women struggle to become, if they get given an opportunity to be part of a community, for example, a local community, they often shy away from that because they worry that in order to have to be a part of that community, they're going to have to give more than they've got. And often many well-being activities require us to give before
yes.
when we're already really depleted. So
Mm,
gardening and creating a horticultural therapy garden, which is what I help women to do, actually doesn't really require anything of you other than that 5 or 20 minutes. The minute you go out there, if by doing certain activities, you can actually start to restore yourself almost immediately. It doesn't you don't have to wait until the garden's looking gorgeous to get the benefits, I guess is what I'm saying.
sure.
Like, it's in the doing of the gardening that actually that's when you start to restore yourself. And then, like you said, the end product is a beautiful byproduct. You've got, yes, I've got a beautiful garden, but actually it's in the digging of the soil, the pulling up of the weeds,
Yeah.
the planting of the seeds or the plants, that it's in the act of doing that we get to restore ourselves. So, then we can come to all of the situations that we have in our life feeling restored in ourselves, and we can choose where to give our energy. But when you're already feeling so depleted, it's really hard to feel like you need to participate in something when you just don't have the bandwidth for it. And that's completely my experience, like when I was burnt out, but also still now as a mother, like all of my goodness, I want to give all of my energy, I want to give to my loved ones. And then if I've got some left, it goes to my friends. And then if it's got some left, it goes to wider community groups. But if I'm not, watering this and me, I don't have anything else to give anyone else. And not that I think the reason we should water ourselves is so we can give to other people, because actually we are enough and we deserve to be watered regardless of who we're supporting.
Regardless.
But I
Yeah.
think for many of the people that I work with, they are already supporting and holding space for a lot of people in their lives, but there's no one holding space for them and helping and holding them. So my work is to help them create that garden that holds them, so they've got that space.
And what sort of areas in a horticultural therapy garden do you look at with the people that you're working with? Like, are there certain plants that we should be including, or how would that therapy garden work?
So it depends how I work. So I work one-to-one with people, but
Yeah.
also in my membership. In fact, I'm going to be starting I don't know when this episode's going out, but I'm going to be starting a live round in my membership to take people through this process in spring, so 21st of March.
Okay. Yep. It'll
And
be out before spring.
okay, good to know. So because it is kind of personal. So for
Mm,
example, it depends on the size of your garden. So I always say you don't need a huge garden. You can have different pockets within the garden, but we
okay.
look at a few things. We look at color. We look at the effect of color. So we always start with, how do we want to feel? How do we want our garden to make us feel? Do we want it to help us feel energized? Do we want it to help us feel calm? Do we want it to help us feel peaceful? And then we bring in the colors according to that. And you can have absolutely different areas in your garden, even if it's small, for different things. You absolutely can. So in the vast majority of gardens, most people have an area where they might sit out in the summer and have some dinner, for example. So that would be your kind of like entertaining area. So generally I'd say, color wise, we'd want that to be quite high vibe. We might want the plants to be quite energizing. So we'd look at a few different things for that. We'd look at like the scent of the plants. We'd look at the colors and maybe the patterns on the leaves, for example.
Yeah.
And then if we created an area that was for calming and relaxation, we'd probably include some cooler colors, not quite so energizing ones to kind of calm your nervous system. We definitely include some calming scents in there, your classics like lavender. Not everybody likes lavender though, so there are other options. Again, we look at sort of what plants bring up good memories for you, because generally good memories bring a sense of calm and peace. So we would work that into the garden as well. And then also in a kind of calm area, we'd look at sort of lovely sensory plants that feel nice to touch. There's a beautiful plant that I recommend all the time. And actually I just recommended it to Country Living because they asked me this exact question about like what sensory plants should we include in a garden to feel calmer. And it was angel wings. And it's like these beautiful kind of big white, they look like big white leaves, but they look like angel wings, but they're really soft. So when you stroke them, it's like stroking a puppy's ear. So if you're ever feeling like, because you just had a really like
Yeah.
stressful situation happen, maybe like your little one's kicking off and you're like, I just need 5 minutes, you can go out there and inhale those lovely calming scents, but also really, lock in as many of your senses as possible, as many touch
Yeah.
points as possible. So yeah, so it's personal, but there are some kind of, ways we can dive
Yeah.
into those personal things. And I do this exercise with clients in group settings and they all come up with different things because everybody's different,
Yeah.
right? Like
Everyone is different.
I don't believe in like putting out planting plans. Like you'll see a lot of gardening people like, oh, do this planting plan for this border or
Yeah.
whatever. And I'm like, really? Do you really want to have the same garden as everyone else? Because I bloody don't. Like you're not the same as anyone else in this world. So my skill, I guess, is yes, creating those beautiful gardens, but also doing it so it is actually unique to you. So I'm tapping into like you inside you
Yeah.
and bringing those things to the fore and sort of then combining that with my horticultural knowledge to
Yeah.
create a space that really feels like you, because lots of people get garden designers in who will come and create you a beautiful garden, but actually I believe that if you've not had a hand in creating it, it will never feel truly feel like yours, and you'll never truly feel that connection. Yes, you'll feel good when you go out there, but you won't feel like grounded and connected to the garden. And that is the key for me.
My garden is an absolute shit tip.
Yeah. And many are.
We moved in like a good few years ago, and we are renovating,
Yeah.
but the garden is there's lots of slabs. There's a very small area of grass. Down the other end, there's the shed and the pagoda, but it's like it's very cold, as in like it's cold outside, but it is also a very cold space. And I love being in nature. So when I go out there, I'm like, oh, I wish we could have, just this little area of wildflowers, because
Mm.
I love wildflowers for the bees and for the insects and everything. But it can feel overwhelming
Yeah.
when you look at it and think, oh my God, where do I start?
Yeah. Yeah. That's one of the biggest things people say, is that I just don't even know where to begin, which is why working with me either in one-to-one or a group setting, and I lead you
Yeah.
through the steps, because, most of us don't have the bandwidth to sit down and work out a plan. Most of us need, and actually, I don't think there's any shame in that. Like, I don't sit at the start of the year with my business and, I find it really overwhelming to create a plan for my business, which is why I work with a business coach, because they bring their expertise to the
Yeah.
situation. So, one of my biggest things is people tend to look at the garden as a whole and go, oh my God, like it's too overwhelming. But I always say, and like I said, I'll take people through this on the live round, but just choose one area to start with, because actually it's about getting your confidence up, a lot of it. And if you try and spread yourself too thin, you'll feel like, oh, I've not really achieved anything. If you actually just focus on one area and you're like, right, I want to do some wildflowers, or I want to create some lovely pots to go under my pagoda when we sit out there in the summer, it's all sensory and beautiful. And just choose one area and kind of cut your teeth on that. I think as women, we really struggle to allow ourselves to be beginners, because when we were at school or in the workplace or just at all in life, it doesn't feel safe for us to make a mistake. So we'd rather not even try, because then we can kind of guarantee our safety. But actually, I'd argue that by not trying, you're not really staying any safer. You're just, because, I think as
You're
humans, you're
limiting
limiting
yourself.
yourself. And as humans, I think, it's in our nature to grow and try new things. And actually, if you really truly want to feel more fulfilled, you kind of have to do that. And so I say to people, just start really small with one area. And if you feel like or maybe yourself really well, like I know myself, and you're like, I need some accountability to do that, because I know I do. If I've ever got anything to do, I have to tell somebody, or I have to be in a community that kind of brings me along for the ride. And, if you want to come and do that with a group of people, then please come and join us in the Seed, because, I think there's real power in collective action.
Yes.
Even though we're in our own separate gardens, but actually, we are really making a choice to prioritize ourselves, to reconnect ourselves with the earth. And I know that sounds like a bit woo and hippy dippy, but actually, like, we came from the earth, like 50 years ago, maybe a bit more than that now, I'm showing my age. 100 years ago, we would be growing our food in the earth. We wouldn't be schlepping over to blimmin' Sainsbury's, would we, to get it? And that, in that very nature, and don't get me wrong, like, obviously it's great because it's commoditized it's made it quick and simple for us, but actually it's contributed to that disconnection. Humans are wired for connection. That's what we all want. And it doesn't have to be with other human beings, especially if you're feeling like strung out and like you've already had like too much human connection because you've had your kids. But you still want to feel connected to a living thing, then your garden is a perfect place for that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would just say start small, like just choose one area, be intentional with it,
And get out in the garden, like you say. Just go into the garden and stand in it,
Yeah. Yeah.
and see how you feel.
And another big one is, if you don't have hours and hours, and actually I'm writing an email sequence, a welcome sequence for my email list at the minute. And it's talking about, I don't really believe in spending hours and hours in the garden. I don't think it's actually that impactful. And actually the research shows that if you spend 20 minutes every day in the garden, the well-being benefits are far better than than like less,
Long hours.
yeah, than long hours. And also because you're
Yeah.
kind of topping up those stores. So you're going out in the garden,
Yes.
you're doing the thing, you're getting the dopamine hits, you're feeling good, you're getting in that flow state, which is kind of like, your
Mm.
stresses and your worries go to the back of your mind. And then the next day you're getting out there again and you're just re-topping up the stores. So at no point
Yeah.
whereas if you go and you do a big woo in the garden for the weekend, then you've got to get all through the week, which, depending on how
Yeah.
much you like your job, maybe is not that great. And then you've got to wait for the next spike again. Whereas if you can kind of like go like that,
Yeah.
you're well, it's more like that, isn't it? Because you're never having a
Yeah.
chance to drop down.
Incremental.
Yeah. So you can maintain that, that good feeling and also reduce your stress levels. So I think the research says that if you guard people who gardened every day had 4.2% lower stress levels than people who didn't garden. Now, I know 4.2% doesn't seem that good, but Jesus Christ, like I'd take anything I can get.
Absolutely. Me too.
If it's literally, and it's getting you a beautiful garden as well and helping you in so many other ways, I kind of just think, great. I think there's too much reliance, isn't there, in our society of like, oh, can I just take a quick pill and feel better?
Instant.
But actually, it doesn't really work. It just doesn't really work because, you don't really know the impacts that it's having on other parts of your body, for example. So it's like if you can do something that's natural and all the research points to only the positive benefits. And, most of us, not everybody, but most of us have got gardens sitting there unloved, actually, that we find we look out on and we feel really sad
Yeah.
and they just
Yeah.
really bring our mood down. Imagine if you could look out the window and see some lovely, brightly coloured flowers, even if you just put a couple of pots on the patio, it doesn't
Yeah.
have to
Well, that's what
be,
I'm thinking.
yeah, it doesn't have to be
Yeah.
like, and I guess this is my message is like when people join in the live round on the seed, it's for a year because it's like this is not going to be overnight. And
Yeah.
actually, it shouldn't be because you need to try things, make mistakes. Things will die. Of course, they will.
Yeah.
That's okay. So yes, it's about having that garden, but it's about the lessons you learn on the way. And actually those will impact all areas of your life because, once you've given yourself that permission and the permission to be a beginner and try something new in the garden and realize that, yes, things might go wrong and you might make mistakes, but actually nothing really that bad is going to happen. Then you might be
Yeah.
more willing to, I don't know, put yourself up for a promotion at work, for example, because you'll have shown yourself that actually when you try something new or you allow yourself to be a beginner or you put yourself out there, it doesn't all completely come crumbling down around you,
No. You don't need anything else to be okay.
Yeah. And actually,
That's something that I've come to.
I would
Yeah.
argue that like that is the patriarchy in action, isn't it? Like keeping us all not trying anything new for fear of it all going to shit.
Rumbling.
And it's just keeping us stuck. And it's like, I'm so done with it. I'm so done with it. Like women are so powerful and amazing. I mean, Jesus, we like grow life, we grow human life. So why are we still buying into this bollocks message that like we just need to stay doing the do and taking care of everyone else and not having great ideas and putting ourselves out there? And that's why I love like coming on podcasts because I'm like, you've taken that, you've got a busy life, right? And you've taken the effort, you've put the effort to, put your wisdom and other women's wisdom into the world. That is
Absolutely.
so needed, like against a backdrop of largely male voices. And
Mhm.
I think, I really hope in this generation that, like, I look at my daughter, I'm raising two daughters, and I'm like, gosh, I really hope when it kind of comes to your generation, you don't like immediately question yourself just because you're female, or immediately think, I don't have the capacity, the capability of doing that thing. Whereas most average white men would be like, yeah, I'll give it a bash.
Yeah.
I really want my girls to have that, like, oh, I'll give it a go. It might not work out,
Yeah.
but I'll give it a go. And do you know what? They don't have that at the minute. Like I see it in them. My eldest will not.
Mm.
She's like, oh, I don't want to do that because what if I don't win? Or what if I don't do it right?
Sure.
And I'm like, but hang on, it's about the experience. It's not
Yeah.
about the winning or the losing. It's about what you actually
Showing up.
But unfortunately, the education system, I mean, goodness, you're a teacher, it's about reward, isn't it? It's not really about the experience. It's about let's get them doing this tick box exercise because that's what the government
Yeah.
demands. And
Well, the rewards
yeah,
are extrinsic rather than intrinsic.
Yeah.
So, it's not necessarily coming from a place of self. It's always, what can I do to impress
so and so.
this teacher,
Yeah.
complete this exam to get this test result
Yeah.
to go on to the next thing.
So I always say to
It's very difficult.
I
It's
always
very
say to my
difficult.
daughter when she comes home, she's like, "Oh, I did X, like, I don't know, I got a sticker
Mm.
because I did
A
something."
sticker. Get rid of the sticker
Oh,
charts.
don't, yeah. And I'm like, and she'll tell me whatever the thing is that she's done, and I'm like, "Oh, how did you feel? Like, did you feel really proud
Yeah,
of yourself?" And she was like, it doesn't even occur to her. She's like, "Oh, yeah, yeah, I did," you know? And I'm like, isn't that interesting that like she's doing it, like you said, to get that sticker, to get that approval from that
yeah,
teacher that she adores. She's not doing it to think I'm
for
going to do
herself.
this for me. So
And then you
yeah,
think long term, the repercussions of that later on down the line,
burnout.
and it will often lead to burnout. Absolutely. And then when when you hit a wall, when you hit a challenge, when you, like you say, when you're made redundant, or relationships fall apart, or whatever it is, when life throws the curveball, you think, well, what do I do now? Who is this for? Like, as you were saying, my identity is so tied to that thing, or
Yeah, that
getting the
external
rewards, getting the
validation.
external.
Yeah.
Exactly. So we do have to think really carefully. And I will just say for those people who are listening, that all of the links to Kendall's website and all of the one-to-one and group sessions that you run will be in the show notes. So please, please go and check that out. She's also on YouTube.
YouTube.
So you can go and have a little watch of those videos that you've mentioned as well. Can I ask, do you have a favourite flower?
I do, yeah. It's a dahlia.
So why a dahlia?
Because they're all
What is it
really
about the
different.
dahlias?
There's like, so not only are there loads of different colours, but there's all different shapes. And I just think there's two reasons. One, my granddad used to grow loads of them.
Okay.
So that is like a core memory for me, like going back to those. But yeah, they're a bit tricksy as well at times. Like they can be a bit, they can be a little bit, they can be a bit tricksy. So I feel like they're quite aligned to me. Not that I'm tricksy, that makes me sound bad, but I'm not the
I know
easiest
what you
person
mean.
to live with. Do you know what I mean? I have my little conditions that I like. And if life is not
Yeah,
quite right, I
sure.
feel all at sea. And I think dahlias are similar. But really for me, it's about their variety, like how many different types and colors. I think they're a really beautiful analogy for the world, in that we're
Yeah,
all a species, we're all a collective, and yet we all have our own individual strengths, weaknesses, funny little things about us. We look different, we behave slightly differently, we like slightly different things. I just think it's a really, just a really lovely flower. So
yeah. And does creativity show up in other aspects of your life other than gardening? Because obviously that is a creative endeavor, but can you see it showing up in other areas as well that you go to,
yeah.
to recharge and to
Yeah,
replenish?
so I journal a lot. Now, largely my journaling is just like literally like brain dumping. But what I often find coming out will be like a really good creative idea, which I then will
Mm,
kind of write about on Substack or in an email or whatever sort of pops up for me. So that my
yeah,
gardening's very much unlocked that because it was that classic thing of when I was at school, I was told I couldn't really write. I was a scientist, so I was very much pigeonholed into that box. So like English wasn't my thing. So I kind of internalized that story, and for a really long time told myself that I wasn't a writer, I couldn't write. And actually I'm writing a book now because I'm like, I think books are such a brilliant way to get your message and your methods out to people who, maybe don't have the money to join a program or feel like they don't have the
yeah,
time. I think, but for a long time, I kind of had to give myself the permission that I could write a book,
yeah,
because I think I had that teacher's voice in my head saying, oh, you're not good at writing. And it's really frustrating. Now, I appreciate obviously writing a horticultural therapy book. It is kind of a blend of like English and science, isn't it? Because I'm
yeah,
bringing like the science in, but also it's going to be a really practical book because, I'm all about getting people taking action. I don't want people to just read this nice coffee table book and not actually do anything. So,
yeah.
if you end up buying the book, I want it filthy and covered in mud, just so you know, like I want it out in the garden with you. So you actually are practicing the things. And I'd love
What's it called?
well, yeah, it hasn't got a name yet, so
Oh, it hasn't got a
it's
name
still
yet.
being
How
written. Yeah, I
wonderful.
think that will come like right at the end, probably. But it's
Are
all
you planning to release that this year
no, so
or
it'll
next
be
year?
2027. Yeah.
Okay.
So interestingly, I was approached by a publisher about writing it.
Yeah.
So I hadn't actually even really thought about writing a book, but I was approached by a publisher and I was like, oh, okay, fine. So I started writing the book. Anyway, then they decided not to take it forward. So now I'm in this weird
Okay.
place of like, do I start pitching to other publishers or do I
Mhm.
like self-pub and go down that route?
Okay.
One of my friends has just started was just starting a hybrid publishing company. So it's like self-pub, but with some support. So
Nice.
that's definitely an option as well, but I'm just kind of getting on and writing it in the meantime because I know what I want to say. So
Yeah.
it's all really practical. All of the chapters are a feeling. So feelings that we struggle with. So there's one on grief, there's one on loneliness, there's one on anger, because I think as women we really struggle to show anger. And
Yeah.
it's going to talk all about the kind of the reasons why we struggle to feel that particular feeling. It's going to talk about how those feelings feel in our body, because I think so many people are so disconnected from how those feelings are in their body. And then it's going to at the end have horticultural therapy activities for people to go and start allowing those feelings to come up and out of them so they can release them.
Brilliant.
And then there's also positive feelings as well, because, you know, once we've got rid of all the shit that we're carrying, we actually want to amplify the good stuff, right?
Absolutely.
So there's pride. Again, why do we struggle to feel proud of ourselves? And yet it's such an important thing to have pride in what we do. Hope. And gratitude. So yeah, so there's like going to be a mix of like, I'm doing air quotes here for people that are listening, but negative emotions and positive
Yeah.
emotions, because and I say that because all emotions are important. You know, we can't just, you know, I said this to a friend once. I said, you can never feel true joy and elation if you don't let yourself feel the bad feelings. You just can't, because you're kind of stuck in that interim stage of like numbness, because you're like,
Yes.
I can't, the minute I start to feel, because often good feelings feel similar in the body to bad feelings to start with. And what happens is you start to feel that joy and then your body goes, this is scary. It might be a bad feeling. Shut it down.
Yeah.
So actually my work and the book is going to be about helping people to build the capacity in their garden and you know, you might do one of the activities in the book and be like, and find yourself starting to let the emotion out and then go, oh no, I can't do it. But it's about building the capacity in the nervous system. So it's about keeping on practicing those things so that you then can
Fantastic.
eventually let them flow free
Let them flow.
and you know, feel more, which I know sounds
Yeah.
crazy. Maybe that's what the book will be called. Feel more in your garden. Sounds
Feel
a bit weird.
more.
Yeah. I don't
Feel
know. I
more in
just
your
think,
garden.
yeah, I think that's
I
really
know. Yeah.
important. And that's, although people don't come to me and go, oh, I want to feel more, you know, I want to feel my emotions more.
Yeah.
That generally
That is
is
what it
what
is.
happens. So yeah, once you've got that place that you feel safe, that holds you, then you could, you know, let it all hang out.